What's going on?
This toilet has driven me absolutely crazy.
Really?
It
What's
makes
going on?
noise all by itself day and night, to the point where some nights we just shut off the water because we can't sleep.
It can drive you crazy,
And
can't it?
then in the morning again, turn back
Yeah.
on the water. So
All right, so what's the sound? Does it sound something like that?
yes, that's it.
All right. Have you done anything about it?
My husband has changed something, which didn't do any good.
All right, this part looks like it's new. Let me just explain what goes on inside of any toilet tank. There's two important parts. One is this, it's called the fill valve. Water's connected right here down from the street. Water comes into the tank, and there's a float like this that can rise as the water fills into the tank. In the old days, these things used to have a ball like this attached to the side that you could bend. So that part looks new. But there's another important part, and that's called the flush valve. That flush valve sits right here and is connected to the tank lever right here. And as you lift this, the water leaves the tank, goes down to flush the bowl, and it drops, and then the water will refill through the fill valve. What I think is happening is that this was not the valve that was in question. I think something's going on where the water is leaking by on this flush valve right here. So this is the culprit right here, the flush valve, not the fill valve that your husband replaced. Oh. Now, I see something I don't see often these days inside your toilet tank, and this plastic reservoir right here.
Yes.
There's also a date code right here, and that says 1992. And it tells me it was back from the era in American plumbing when the rules changed. The manufacturers now had to have toilets that went from 3.5 gallons all the way down to 1.6 gallons per flush. Now, this is one of the first attempts that they did. The plastic reservoir would actually hold back some of the water. So you see when I flush it, the water in the reservoir leaves, but the tank stays filled, and that used less water. The nice thing is we're going to take this all apart. We don't have to do this anymore. We can actually replace it with standard parts.
Oh, great.
All right, I'm going to start by turning the water off right here. Okay, let's just get the last of this water. That's going to pretty much do it. All right, so the water's out of the tank. Now, in order to get that flush valve out of the tank, we actually have to disconnect the tank from the bowl. Before we do that, I want to disconnect the water. Now that has a nut right here. I've got the water off, as you remember. And now we're just going to loosen that nut counterclockwise. Now there could be a little bit of water. I'll put a rag right here. All right, and now there's two brass bolts right here. See, there's a nut and a bolt right here, and on the other side. We're going to loosen them, and the tank will be removable.
Great.
With a regular blade screwdriver, I'll hold back against the top of the brass bolt and loosen enough with an open end. Brass bolts can come apart, which is great. Okay. And now, this is what holds the flush valve into the tank, this large nut right here. To get that out, I'm going to actually use some pretty industrial sized pliers. Now we can take out that reservoir. Now see down inside here, here's this flapper right here that will go up and down.
Right.
And then it has to seat down at the bottom right there. So I'm not sure if it was the flapper or even the bottom seat. Let me show you on the new one. That I think what was happening is that either this was pitted down here or the flapper was worn. So what we're going to do is put this new unit in with a nice positive seal right here. So there is a gasket right here that will sit on the water side of the tank. I'm going to stick that right through right here. You tighten that right up. All right, to make the connection between the tank and the bowl, I have some nice brand new brass bolts with washers right here that go on the water side. There's one. And then there's a washer and a nut on each. Okay, bolts are tight. Now, to make a nice tight seal between the tank and the bowl, this flush valve comes with this, a spud gasket. And that's made exactly to fit right over the bottom of those threads, and that'll go between the tank and the bowl. So you can see the spud gasket right here fits beautifully right there, and there's the 2 bolt holes. And that just drops right down into place. All right, on these bottom connections, you can see there's a rubber gasket. That's not to hold back water, it's just to protect the porcelain a little bit. So now I want to snug them up by hand and then tighten them up, alternating back and forth with an open-end wrench. I want the tank to sit level. With the tank secured, now it's time to reconnect the water. Tighten up that nut. Just a slight snug. Don't over tighten this nut. Good. So before I put the water back on, there's an important adjustment I have to do, and that's the length of this chain. I want to be sure that the tank lever's action lifts that flapper right away and makes it flush properly. So I hold the chain up against that hook, and that should be just perfect. Okay, I'm going to put the refill tube in right here, and now it's time to turn the water back on. Good. All right, so with these parts in place, we really have a lot of adjustability inside this toilet tank. We can adjust the water level on this fill valve right here, so we can make the water level higher or lower if we need it. But this flush valve also has something I've not seen before, and that's adjustability for how much water leaves the tank and goes down to the bowl. Normally with a flapper like this, it lifts, and this thing is filled with air, so the water in the tank holds this up until all the water goes down and finally it drops. Look at what this has. I can adjust this right here. So now, when this thing lifted, instead of being filled with air, it would much more quickly fill with water, and it would drop, which means less water would go down. So we'd be able to save water, much like we did with the reservoir that we took out.
That's wonderful.
All right, so we're trying to balance performance with conservation.
Right.
And the last thing I've not seen ever before is this, an adjustable overflow right here. So if we had a different style toilet tank, we could set this just right to make sure that we never overflowed onto the floor. That wants to be about 3/4 of an inch above the water. Perfect. All right, so your husband replaced the fill valve. We replaced the flush valve. You pretty much have a brand new 20-year-old toilet.
That's wonderful, Richard.